Steve Hedden, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Now, when we think about the country's electricity problems, I think many South Africans, and certainly government, think of the problems when it comes to generation. And we know that government's plans to address the energy crisis, or as they like to call it, energy challenge, has been increased generation capacity. But in your paper entitled Gridlocked, you say that this shouldn't be the main focus. Introduce us to that idea.
Well, I think increasing generation capacity is certainly part of the solution to this challenge, but that's only part of the solution. So it doesn't make sense to invest so heavily in increasing generation capacity without also rethinking transmission and distribution, which is the electricity grid and how electricity actually gets from where it's produced to where it's consumed.
Steve, can you give us an indication of how it is transmitted at the moment? So what does our current system look like and where are the flaws?
They're not necessarily flaws. It's that generation capacity is changing, which means the grid needs to adapt. So historically, most electricity has come from coal fields in Mpumalanga, which is shipped to Gauteng, where the demand is highest. And in the future, more and more generation capacity will be located in the Cape provinces, which means it'll need to be transported up to the demand centers, which are not changing. So it's not necessarily a problem in the past. In the past, the demand and supply overlapped quite well. In the future, there's going to be not as much overlap.
Speak to us a little bit about the way South Africa currently generates electricity. We know that we have a very coal-intensive system, and certainly it would seem that that is the main focus of South Africa's generation capacity if we don't consider the nuclear deals that we're currently discussing. Is this a sustainable model? What does Gridlocked say about that?
So most of electricity in South Africa, most energy in South Africa comes from coal. We're very dependent on coal. In the future, the current long-term energy plan has nuclear capacity, wind, solar, and gas, and more coal. But most of this wind and solar is located, as I said, in the Cape provinces. And also, the nature of wind and solar is fundamentally different. Wind and solar is inherently intermittent, means it changes throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout the year. So it can't be dispatched and it's not as reliable, whereas coal-fired power plants can be ramped up and down as the system's operator needs them.
And if we look at the system as it stands, we have centralized electricity production being shipped from Eskom, essentially, to the consumer. But according to this research, and if we look realistically at what needs to happen in the country, we need to diversify the electricity production. That would certainly mean a very different form of transporting energy. Won't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right, so it's happening not just in South Africa, but it's a global phenomenon. It's historically and traditionally, electricity grids work in industrial centralized production, and it's one direction. So you have these enormous, usually fossil fuel fired power plants, which generate electricity and then transport it to all the consumers. And with independent power producers, with small scale residential generation and renewable generation, the system is becoming decentralized, intermittent, and more of this energy is embedded, meaning it's produced behind the meter on people's houses. So the entire system is changing. It's moving from a centralized industrial consumption, and it's moving towards decentralized and intermittent system.